highly Jah, Jehovah, Selassie I said, the glories and advantages of freedom cannot be purchased with all the world's material wealth. And if you've been paying attention to Star Witness, then you will know that the original Ethiopian Bible, written in Ge'ez alone, without original Hebrew and without original Ge'ez, was not in the Old and New Testament format. For that structure was created in Europe during the Renaissance period, right before they created transatlantic slavery. Hence, they try to put the future Exodus story in the past by placing the King David in the past. They want you to believe that he was here 3,400 years ago, when in fact the Bible was written prior to his arrival. And what they also try to do was have you believe that Jerusalem is in Israel, when in fact they are in two different places, because Israel represents Ethiopia. Just like Solomon, they want you to believe that Solomon was crowned in Jerusalem, when in fact the venue of his coronation will be in Ethiopia. So let's watch. In Judah is God known. His name is great in Israel. In Salem also is his tabernacle. In other words, Israel and Jerusalem are in two different places. And his dwelling place is in Zion. In other words, in Ethiopia, Selah. And who is that? The God of Jacob. So the God of Jacob lets you know that his dwelling place is in Zion. And that is not in Salem or in Judah. So let's watch. Who is the king of Zion?
He became governor of the province. In 1928, he led the troops that killed Empress Zoditu's husband, who was not of royal blood, and became regent. He became emperor on November 2nd, 1930, and was crowned Haile Selassie I, King of Kings, King of Zion, conquering lion of the seed of Judah, power of the Trinity.
Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. He is also the root of David. So the king of all kings is the root of David. Hence, he is King David himself. So let's read what is written about David. In view of that, I said, here I have come in the roll of the book being written about me. In other words, David, because it's a Psalm of David, came after the book was written. Also in Psalm 56. Are they not in your book? In union with God, I shall praise his word. In union with Jehovah, I shall praise his word. And who is that? David. Is a Psalm of David. And one of David's many names is the firstborn. And also I myself shall place him as firstborn, the most high of the kings of the earth. To time indefinite I should preserve my loving kindness towards him. Now who is that? Once I have sworn in my holiness to David, I will not tell lies. His seed itself will prove to be even to time indefinite, and his throne as the sun in front of me. In other words, you're literally looking at King David, and he was put in the past in Europe. So let's watch what happened. The Gihon River, mentioned in the Bible as one of the four rivers flowing out of Edom, has long been associated with Ethiopia. Solomon immediate coronation, specifying Gihon as the venue. In other words, Solomon will be crowned in Ethiopia. Why? Because are you not as the sons of Ethiopia to me, O sons of Israel? In other words, the Ethiopians are from Israel. And let's see who started the transatlantic slavery.
When Scotland was Jewish, quote, the Scottish royal Stuarts were equally dark and Semitic in appearance. Of Charles II's dusky appearance, his mother, Queen Henrietta Maria, had been half mortified, writing after her confinement that the child was so dark she was ashamed of him. He was quickly dubbed the Black Boy. Enemies made out that he was a black bastard begotten by a black Scotsman, end quote. This is just another confirmation regarding some Stuart monarchs we covered on this page. King James I was described as ruddy in complexion, a reddish brown, like the biblical King David. Another parallel authors of his time noted.
So the homosexual David of Scotland, he started transatlantic slavery, because the first slaves were brought to Jamestown, Virginia.
While his mother Mary of Scots' complexion was described being of a delicate brunette, a light brown, similar to her cousin Elizabeth I of England. We also covered sources describing his grandson Charles II. Wanted posters after the Battle of Worcester describe him being tall and of a sable hue. This is what the color sable looks like, a dark brown color. We can see why he was nicknamed Black Boy. The Stuarts and their relatives in this time period weren't usually as dark as him, which reminds us of King Solomon, darker than...
Darker. Remember, Solomon represents Ethiopia. So let's watch what they did. Remember, the transatlantic slavery was Africans being taken from Africa directly to the New World, or what they call the New World. But before that, this happened. When Spain, because Spain followed Portugal. First, Portugal was the first to enslave Africans by bringing them up towards Europe. And then Spain followed in the 15th century doing this, in the 16th century doing the same thing. And then they did this.
You don't know that the first Africans to be brought in slavery was not taken from Africa, but from Spain and carried to Haiti, then called Hispaniola, in 1506.
Hello, pay attention. They've been doing stuff from the longest. So watch what God says in reference to Jerusalem. So Manasseh was the king of Jerusalem. And he have done which was evil in the sight of the Lord after the abominations of the heathen. So he built up again high altars of Baal. So he made his son do the same. So that's why God said, the Lord said to David and to Solomon his son, in this house and in Jerusalem. In other words, King David and Solomon are not in Jerusalem. That's only mentioned in the Kebra Nagus, which was written by a blonde-haired European. In other words, they try to change the story and have you believe that King David and Solomon are from Jerusalem. But it clearly says, and in Jerusalem. In other words, David and Solomon are not in Jerusalem, where they are building altars of Baal. So that's why God says this. Because Manasseh, king of Judah, also the king of Jerusalem, have done wickedly above all, the God of Israel said, I am bringing such evil upon Jerusalem and Judah, because they have done which was evil in my sight, and have provoked me to anger since the days their father came forth out of Egypt, even unto this day. So what is happening today that happened a long time ago?
There were black people in Greece and Rome before there were Greeks and Romans in here. So I'm asking you to prove to me, where do you come from genetically? How did you get here?
I can tell you which country I'm connected.
Yes. My ancestors all around the world, whether it be Indigos, aka Indian, blacks in America, whether it be the Egyptians, Cushites, which means blacks in Africa, whether we go to the Naga Kush.
The Egyptians. Now, who are the Egyptians down with? The Greeks. Remember, the original Greeks were black, just like the original Egyptians, which came from the Cushite kingdom, which was Ethiopians. That's why Egypt was referred to as the granddaughter of Ethiopia, and Egyptians were referred to as disobedient Ethiopians. Why? Because they became part of this kingdom. So after Alexander defeated Darius, the king of the Persians, he died, and then his kingdom was parted among them. So in other words, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Greece. Then it became Rome. Rome became part of it. Then Jerusalem. So whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem. Also in Egypt. So look at what it clearly says. They builded, they the city of David, a great and strong wall. In other words, Jerusalem used to be a city of David. So they stored the spoils of Jerusalem, for it was a place to lie in wait against the sanctuary and an evil adversary to Israel. In other words, the real Israel is not in Jerusalem, because in Jerusalem, they're doing evil against Israel. In other words, two different places. So follow God. Now, man, and remember who the king of Zion is. It's an Ethiopian king.
Husband, who was not of royal blood, and became regent. He became emperor on November. In 1928, he led the troops that killed Empress Zoditu's husband, who was not of royal blood, and became regent. He became emperor on November 2nd, 1930, and was crowned Haile Selassie I, King of Kings, King of Zion.